Glover Teixeira versus Jamahal Hill. Guys, this is almost upon us. I mean, every time we get a title fight announced, then you got to wait. You get excited, but you have to wait. This one, if you'll recall, because of the unexpected draw between Ankalaev and Blachowicz, gets made at a press conference, and it was only 30 days away, and that 30 days is now coming in on about 12 days. So it's a very interesting thing. I go over to check at DraftKings. I want to see who the favorite is. Now, I believe that it would be Glover Teixeira, and I believe that for very clear reasons, of which it's in Brazil, it's at home. Glover was preparing for a world title fight. I believe that Glover is going to be the favorite. Much to my surprise, it was Jamahal. Jamahal is a negative 115 to be exact. Glover is a plus 105. Now, negative 115 to plus 105. For broad stroke colloquial terms, we're talking about even money here. That's a straight fight. Straight up pick 'em fight. That's just about as close as you're going to get, about as close as I've seen in a period of time. Now, what can we deduce from that? And why was Glover not the favorite? What was wrong with the reasoning that I supposed? Glover was preparing. This is at home. Glover was getting ready for a title fight. Glover has fought nothing but title fights because he was the champion. We know about Glover's part. I mean, it's very relevant, right? You have two different contests if you're going 3 rounds versus 5 rounds. A lot of times that gets missed. There is a number of fights that if you were to change them to 25 minutes, you would also change who the favorite is. Now, when you're dealing with Glover Teixeira and you're adding those extra rounds, generally speaking, that's where he does his finest work. And I had made this comment. I made this comment on TMZ a little over a week ago, and somebody had corrected me, and they said, Chael, how could you say that when Glover's very last fight, he was winning, and the round that he lost was the 5th round? Okay, great. You know what? I'm hoisted by my own baton on that one. But it wasn't a cardio issue. I don't believe there was a cardio issue in that fight. I believe he got caught in a position that he couldn't get out of, and he had to surrender. That's what I saw. I still do see that cardio favoring Glover. And I'll bring you guys an inside stat that you may not know, and this is for Jamahal Hill. But Jamahal Hill's in the 5-round club. There is a narrative out there that he isn't. There's a narrative out there that he was booked for 5 rounds, by example, against Thiago Santos, but it ended up being a finish within the 4th round. You're right to a degree, and that's within the UFC. If you do a little further research, Jamahal Hill's 4th fight ever, it was in a different promotion. His 4th fight ever was scheduled for 5 rounds. Oh, and by the way, it went to all 5 rounds. In fact, why don't you do that? If you're a big fight fan, why don't you do that? Quick homework assignment. You can do it right here as we're talking together, but bring up Jamal's record. And I'll tell you why you should do that. I think you're going to be surprised. He's very young in this game. Jamal started fighting in, was it 2017? And 5 years before you go, well, Chael, 5 years is a period of time. Well, not really. Not really. Not if you're getting 3 fights per year. Not if he's been in the UFC for 3 years. That means he only did 2 years on the regional circuit. The guy's roughly 30 years old. That's really interesting. That's a really fast climb. And I can even remember for myself the first time I saw him. I would prefer to come over here from a high-handed approach of Chael being the MMA authority looking down on everybody else. That's what I would prefer. But I remember seeing Jamal because I remember when I came and I told you guys, and I simply said I can't imagine I could like this guy anymore. It had to do with his walkout, with his performance, how he handled himself in the ring, on the stick when it was done. It's just one of these things where I look at it now and I go, man, this guy's only been at it 5 years. He's already in the 5-round club. He's already fought and beaten former number 1 contenders. He's already in a world title fight. Oh, and by the way, the most respected line out there set by DraftKings has him as the favorite. That is a pretty big accomplishment. Can we at least agree on that? Now let's break down a little further. Should he be? I mean, if you're going to beat Glover, how are you going to do it? And there are guys who've beaten Glover. Like if you follow the sport, you go, Chael, he's not completely invincible. Well, you're not totally right about that. You're really not totally right about that. You want to stop Glover, you got to stop him. You got to put him down. You must send him into a different form of consciousness. That's very different than getting into an X's and O's battle and you turn an omoplata into a triangle and he reverts and you throw your leg over, you stretch him out in an armbar. That's terribly different. You've never seen that done to Glover. You've never seen him outwitted within the sport. You've never seen him out-techniqued within the sport. You've never seen him out-hearted or out-conditioned, which are things that happens to an athlete later in his career. A fighter does not get better by doing this sport. It's one of the very few sports where experience is not your friend. You leave a part of yourself out there, particularly some of the wars that Glover has been in. But if you did follow Glover and you've been along for the ride, you have seen people separate him from consciousness and get their hand raised. That's very different than going tit for tat and beating him. So if you're trying to use history as your trajectory for the future, you really got to ask yourself one thing. If you think DraftKings is right, if you believe that Jamahal is going to win this fight and he should be the favorite, then you got to ask yourself one thing. In all fairness, can Jamahal separate Glover from consciousness? Because the guys that you've seen beat him, the guys that you've seen get the jump on him, you can talk about reach and you can talk about youth. I'll listen to all of those things, but it comes down to one thing. Will that reach and will that youth lead you to a knockout for Jamahal? Highly unlikely that Jamahal is going to outposition Glover to a point that he's pounding away and a ref steps in with a TKO. Highly unlikely that you're going to see a submission against Glover Teixeira. Highly unlikely that you go out there and fight that guy for 25 minutes and have better endurance and cardio. It's just unlikely by the numbers. So now you're talking about Ken Jamahal on shorter notice. I can't quite call it short notice, and he was prepared. He knew he had Anthony Smith, but I'm shorter notice. Send him into Brazil. Does that weigh in for you at all? What do you want to do with that? But these are all questions, and do you think that's going to lend to the perfect performance where he has the perfect power? Put on Glover, I think it's a lot. I think you're asking a lot. He can definitely do it. Jamahal Hill can definitely do it, but we're not discussing he definitely can. We're not discussing crossing your fingers. We're not discussing a fighting chance. He's the favorite. He's the favorite. It's not just that he can do it. He is now supposed to go out and do that. Do you think that's right? And if you do, why? Where and how? Where does he beat him? How does he get it done? Why is that right? And I see it a little bit differently. I think there's been some mistakes made by Glover over the body of his career that he would agree with me and say, in hindsight, was a mistake. Glover is equally good at the grappling as he is at the striking. But there has been a number of fights where he has struck before he goes into the grappling. There's been a couple of those fights where if you could look back, he should have gone that little bit sooner. And with the right strategy, we have no way to know. And there's a tipping point, right? There's a tipping point where that 40 years old boy, that's a cool thing. And the other side of that fence is, oh, what are you still doing out there? You're a little bit old, right? There's a tipping point that comes for everybody. But I don't know that I've seen the evidence yet that Glover's there. Glover Teixeira is the underdog in a fight for the championship scheduled for up to 5 rounds in Brazil. At least according to DraftKings. Does that sound right to you?